Tragedy of the reservoirs. Are Chinese living under a nuclear bomb? Shandong and Henan suffer severe drought, reservoirs and rivers dry up, crops wither. Changes in CCP official media. Xi targets third plenum. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Tragedy of the reservoirs. Are Chinese living under a nuclear bomb? As June began, extensive flooding occurred throughout southern China, leading to significant loss of life and property. Official reports state that regions such as Guangdong, Guangxi, Fujian, and Anhui witnessed floods that are only expected once every 100 years. There are indications that unexpected releases of water from reservoirs hindered evacuation efforts, causing considerable losses. This raises questions about the role of China's reservoirs in the frequent flood disasters seen in recent years and how the global community evaluates the benefits and drawbacks of large reservoirs. Reservoir topographic maps classified as state secrets, public unaware of risks. Wang Weiluo, a well-known expert in water resources, environmental protection, and ecology based in Germany, commented during the Elite Forum program on NTD-TV that the information regarding the release of water from Chinese reservoirs, among other related materials, is classified as national secrets. Since 2020, Guilin, a city in southern China, has faced severe annual floods. Residents are unaware of their flood risk zone, which could range from once every 5 to 1,000 years. Unlike in the United States, where such topographic maps are accessible online, the Chinese public remains in the dark about their surrounding terrain, including whether their homes are at a higher or lower elevation and whether they are likely to be affected by floodwaters. This lack of information is due to the stringent secrecy of these 1:20,000 scale maps, controlled by the General Staff Department and off-limits to the public. Consequently, the Chinese Communist Party's secrecy laws inflict the most harm on the Chinese people, who remain ignorant of the potential dangers in their environment. For instance, a significant portion of the rise in water levels during the recent flooding in Guilin was attributed to the city's transformation into a so-called sponge city. Previously, the left bank of the Li River was agricultural land that allowed water to pass and flood certain areas. However, recent urban development has blocked these pathways. Although the concept of a sponge city, promoted by Xi Jinping, sounds beneficial, aiming to retain 70% of rainfall within urban areas for water conservation, it conflicts with natural processes and has led to widespread inundation. It is crucial to understand that a primary cause of the flooding disaster in Guilin was the condition of the Qingshe Tan Reservoir, the largest of 4 reservoirs, which is deemed unsafe and in need of reconstruction according to Chapter 4 of the Pearl River Basin Plan. Throughout the flooding, the reservoirs failed to serve any protective function against the floods. Instead, they exacerbated the situation by increasing the flow of floodwaters downstream. Recent discharge figures released by the Guilin Water Conservancy Bureau only reported a rise in flow rate by 300 cubic meters per second without specifying the total volume of water discharged or the initial flow rates. Based on the original design specifications, the Qingshe Tan Reservoir should have been able to manage a discharge rate of nearly 3,400 cubic meters per second, but the observed peak flow downstream in Guilin reached about 5,000 cubic meters per second, indicating that the majority of the flooding resulted from the reservoir's discharge activities. Given its classification as a high-risk reservoir, Qingshe Tan did not store water during the flood season, thus not fulfilling its intended flood control role. This misalignment in function led to a significant man-made disaster, as downstream residents, who believed they were protected by an upstream reservoir, felt a misplaced sense of security. Wang Weiluo also noted that the flooding in Meixian, Guangdong, was directly linked to nocturnal emergency discharges from 2 reservoirs, Changtan Reservoir in Jialing County, with a capacity of 160 million cubic meters, and Huangtian Reservoir in Pingyuan County, which holds about 40 million cubic meters. Reports from residents and netizens revealed that the water level surged rapidly, with increases of up to 6 meters within an hour, reaching the second or even first floors of buildings. Although the situation was initially dire, the floodwaters receded quickly the following day. The coordinated discharge from these 2 reservoirs inflicted considerable damage downstream. Despite this, the Chinese Communist Party attributes all such instances of death and property loss to natural causes, thereby shifting blame from human errors to supposed natural disasters. The tragedy of the reservoirs, 100,000 nuclear bombs hovering over the Chinese. Wang Weiluo stated that China has a total reservoir capacity in its 100,000 dams sufficient to contain the entire country's annual water consumption. Given this immense capacity, why are floods increasingly plaguing China? Today, there is a global shift in understanding concerning reservoir construction, which starkly contrasts with China's current perspective. The trend of building dams worldwide surged after the Hoover Dam was built in the United States. At that time, the prevalent belief was that reservoirs could drive regional economic development, a notion modeled after Tennessee's development strategy in the USA. However, this perspective changed dramatically with the construction of Egypt's Aswan Dam, which caused significant ecological and social repercussions. Consequently, Western scholars reconsider the benefits of building dams, recognizing that the actual gains are far outweighed by the losses. This led to a halt in large-scale dam construction in the West, with the focus then shifting to China. After the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it became evident that reservoir dams are vulnerable in times of war. The bombing of the dam on Ukraine's Dnieper River resulted in severe consequences. In a recent speech, former U.S. President Donald Trump claimed that if the CCP had attempted to invade Taiwan during his administration, he would have bombed Beijing. So, what would be his target? Rewind to 1969, the first time Beijing faced the threat of being bombed. The perpetrator? The Soviet Union. The reason? The Sino-Soviet border conflict at Jinbao Island. Lin Biao, Mao Zedong's designated successor, was at the helm then. According to his secretary, Lin Biao spent days poring over maps. Finally, he pointed to 3 reservoirs near Beijing, Miyun, Guantang, and Huairou, declaring that the Soviets would strike these first if they attacked. In other words, these reservoirs would be ground zero in any Soviet bombing campaign against Beijing. Lin Biao's predictions were substantiated by the Tangshan earthquake in 1976, which nearly caused the Miyun Reservoir Dam to collapse due to a landslide. A report from the Ministry of Water Resources at the time suggested that a breach of this dam would have resulted in flooding in Beijing, Tianjin, and Jixian. Wang Weiluo remarked that reservoir dams consequently pose significant risks in wartime scenarios. With the CCP being hostile to the world, these dams have become vulnerability points. Also speaking in the Elite Forum, Shi Shan, a senior editor-in-chief writer at the Epoch Times, said that China's 100,000 reservoirs are akin to 100,000 nuclear bombs suspended above the heads of the Chinese people. There are pros and cons to building reservoirs. The government reaps the benefits while the disadvantages are borne by the people. Death of 230,000 people, the world's largest dam disaster during the Cultural Revolution. In the Elite Forum, Epoch Times editor-in-chief, Guo Jun, discussed how British historian Toynbee linked the origins of authoritarian systems in agricultural societies to control over water resources. This control necessitated a centralized power structure, meaning that controlling water was tantamount to controlling agriculture and, by extension, society itself. In mainland China, constructing reservoirs required major investments initially, which led to the allocation and requisition of surrounding land for purposes such as electricity generation, thereby creating a vertically structured interest system. During the Cultural Revolution, it was not corporations but the water conservancy departments that were the wealthiest. Following the economic reforms and opening up, investments shifted to areas like land and real estate, involving many interests. The CCP has constructed a vast number of reservoirs. Ideologically, the CCP embraces the philosophy of struggle, deriving endless joy from battling against heaven and earth to alter nature. There was a Chinese Communist Party slogan in the past that Chinese people all could recite in our childhood: "There is no Jade Emperor in heaven, no Dragon King on earth. I am the Jade Emperor, I am the Dragon King, commanding the mountains and rivers to make way, for I have arrived." This was the education they received as children, epitomizing the typical communist way of thinking, extremely domineering. Guo Jun reported that in August 1975, more than 60 reservoirs in Zhangjiang, Henan, collapsed, leading to over 200,000 deaths. During this time, Henan was hit by severe rainstorms, which caused the Banqiao Reservoir in Zhangjiang to suddenly burst, sending floodwaters rushing downstream rapidly. This event triggered the sequential failure of 62 reservoirs of various sizes in the region, causing widespread destruction and virtually wiping out many villages. Initially, the official death toll reported was 26,000 people. However, in August 1987, 8 members from the 6th session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference co-authored an article titled "The Three Gorges Project Does More Harm Than Good." We cannot allow deception of superiors and suppression of subordinates to bring disaster to the country and its people. This article revealed that the failures of the Banqiao and Shandong reservoirs in August 1975 resulted in approximately 230,000 deaths. The incident, which occurred during the Cultural Revolution, had a death toll comparable to the subsequent Tangshan earthquake. Nonetheless, it has been systematically concealed and suppressed by the CCP, with no allowance for reporting or further investigation. Guo said that she was acquainted with a Chinese journalist who was pressured by the authorities and ultimately lost their job for attempting to report on this issue. Guo Jung further explained that the initial collapse at the Banqiao Reservoir, constructed during the Great Leap Forward and inherently unstable as an earthen dam, coupled with the intense rainfall, precipitated the sequential collapse of over 60 reservoirs, a catastrophe directly attributable to CCP government negligence. It was reported that during the disaster, Henan had called for flood discharge, but the State Council failed to respond, leading to this massive disaster. Similarly, the 2021 Zhengzhou floods in Henan were also linked to human errors. For real estate development, many artificial lakes and rivers were created using water from the Changshuang Reservoir. When heavy rains arrived, the reservoir began to overflow and discharge floods, which then surged directly into Zhengzhou City, killing more than 380 people. Guo Jun remarked that while the rising waters in reservoirs are visible disasters, there are also invisible disasters. Beijing, originally a city abundant in rivers and blessed with good feng shui, along with Tianjin, suffered when many reservoirs were built in the surrounding mountainous regions, intercepting water and gradually transforming the area into a semi-arid region through the South-North Water Transfer Project, a slowly unfolding man-made disaster. Sadly, such occurrences are all too common in China. Shandong and Henan suffer severe drought, reservoirs and rivers dry up, crops wither. Amid the floods hitting southern China, the northern regions face high temperatures with little rainfall. The major grain-producing provinces of Henan and Shandong are enduring an ongoing severe drought. Recent online videos reveal that many of Shandong's large reservoirs are completely dried up, displaying cracked beds. Rivers and wells are in a similar state. Yet, the government is suppressing this information. Mr. Liu from Qingdao, Shandong Province, stated, "Some rivers have ceased to flow, and the drought is so severe that watering is futile, leading to poor harvests. The wheat crops were already compromised by the drought before the harvest, they are ruined. Harvesting is now impossible, and the vast affected area remains unreported, with no aid provided. For irrigation, farmers must pay for electricity and water fees, which the government now just appropriates. You can't say the people aren't suffering, they're being silenced." Mr. Zhang, a farmer from Hezi, Shandong, told NTD-TV that although the government quickly collects fees for irrigation water from the Yellow River each year, it delays releasing water when farmers desperately need it. As a result, about 50% of the land still cannot be planted. Many netizens on Douyin suggest that the severe drought in Shandong is a consequence of the policy to revert forest lands back to farmland, viewing it as nature's punishment. A resident from Jinan, Shandong, mentioned, "The trees we've planted in the rural areas of Shandong must be cut down to replant crops. If we don't cut them down, we face fines, with no compensation offered." Additionally, a recent video displayed the Zhangping Reservoir, located on the upper Luo River in Henan, has dried up, leaving the riverbed of the Luo River exposed. Mr. Li, a villager from Nanyang, Henan Province, working in other provinces, reported that it hasn't rained in his hometown for 1 to 2 months, causing a severe drought. He observed, "As I travel through the regions, it's dry in both Henan and Hubei, with corn leaves curling up from the drought. Some areas can irrigate, others cannot, and many rivers are dry. Despite government investments, the funds haven't been properly allocated, the system is corrupt." Other provinces like Shaanxi, Hebei, and Hubei are also suffering from drought. A Shaanxi netizen reported on Douyin on the 26th, "After months of continuous drought, the Fen River has finally ceased to flow, the riverbed is now exposed, devoid of any water, the Fen River in the Hejin segment has dried up completely." Changes in CCP official media, Xi targets third plenum. Before the third plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, analysts noted a significant yet subtle shift in how state media addresses CCP leader Xi Jinping. In detail, a self-media personality whose name translates into English as Quantum Leap noted in an article that CCTV's news network has stopped using General Secretary Xi Jinping or President Xi Jinping in public settings, now referring to him simply as Chairman Xi. This change is seen as deeply significant, suggesting that Xi has reached a status comparable to Mao Zedong, who is known as Chairman Mao. This development prompts questions about Xi's potential official elevation to party chairman and whether the party constitution might be amended at the next plenary session to facilitate this change. Historically, the title of party chairman carries more authority than that of the general secretary, who is just one of the members of the Politburo Standing Committee and does not hold higher authority over others. In contrast, the party chairman also chairs the Politburo and its standing committee, wielding ultimate decision-making power when consensus is lacking. However, political commentator Deng Yuan argues that Xi is unlikely to assume the role of party chairman since he is already a pivotal leader, wielding more power than even Deng Xiaoping did. Additionally, Xi prefers not to designate a successor. Restoring the position of party chairman would imply that the next general secretary would be seen as the heir apparent, a scenario Xi prefers to avoid to prevent stirring further unrest. During his latest show, commentator Chen Pokong discussed this topic. He suggested that if this analysis is accurate, the July plenary session might not introduce a party chairman immediately. However, it could lead to proposals for amending the party constitution to pave the way for Xi to be inaugurated as party chairman at the 21st Party Congress. Chen Pokong also noted that if Xi becomes party chairman, the next critical issue is determining his successor as general secretary. Currently, Kai Chi, a member of the Standing Committee and Executive Secretary, is seen as Xi's most trusted confidant. Yet, Wang Huning, who shares the same age as Kai Chi but is 2 years Xi's junior and has more seniority, also emerges as a potential candidate. This sets the stage for a potential rivalry between Wang Huning and Kai Chi for the position of General Secretary. Amidst this high-level power struggle within the CCP, China is grappling with escalating disasters. The economic downturn continues, compounded by floods in the south and droughts in the north. Northern China faces relentless high temperatures, with some areas in Hebei recording temperatures above 44 degrees Celsius, while Shandong and Henan experienced severe droughts. Concurrently, the southern region contends with heavy rains and floods, with Guangdong witnessing the highest rainfall in 18 years and Guilin and Guangxi facing its worst flood in 26 years. The crisis is expanding, with recent updates indicating flooding in Heilongjiang as well. Quantum Leap noted that this year's natural disasters differ from those in previous years because they have been precisely targeted. The north has experienced a severe drought affecting the major grain-producing provinces. Concurrently, the south has faced massive floods impacting the industrial centers of the Pearl River Delta and the Yangtze River Delta. Both the drought and the floods are unprecedented, once-in-a-century events. Combined, they have forged a lethal scenario. Many question why the government isn't more active in disaster relief or why the media isn't covering these crises more extensively. This is attributed to the CCP's financial breakdown, loss of control at the grassroots, and a lack of funds, power, and resolve to undertake relief operations. Given these circumstances, it is crucial to monitor how the ongoing power struggle in Zhongnanhai will influence China's future. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.